Welcome to Revenue Unscripted, the show for B2B founders, CEOs, advisors, and leaders, where we unpack what really drives stronger revenue and margins, not just product or process, but also people and behaviors. I am your host, Jennica Dixon, president at Slattery Sales Group, and together we'll dive into how real organizations build high-performing cultures, avoid costly mistakes, and turn complex deals into predictable growth. Today, I have the pleasure of having Arin Schultz join us, Chief Growth Officer at Naturepedic. As Chief Growth Officer, Arin leads marketing, sales, retail, customer service, and public relations at Naturepedic, driving a unified growth strategy that advances the brand's mission to provide safer, healthier sleep. Since joining in 2014, he has been instrumental in record-breaking expansion, strengthening Naturepedic's omnichannel presence across DTC, wholesale, and specialty markets while expanding its corporate retail footprint to more than 30 locations. His leadership has guided the company's largest product portfolio expansion to date, broadening its offerings to reach new audiences. He has also championed consumer education initiatives, from thought leadership content to in-store experiences. A father of four and a passionate advocate for conscious consumerism, Arin is dedicated to making healthier sleep accessible to more families. Arin, thank you so much for joining us here today. It is a privilege to have you on Revenue Unscripted.
It's very happy to be here today, Jennica. And anytime I hear my bio being read, it makes me sound more important than I feel that I actually am. No, I mean, all of those things, I'm so in the thick of it and in the weeds that, it's just, it's what I do every day when I come to work. So it's, and obviously any, executive worth their salt knows that like there really is no end to the day per se. My mind's always going with something going around here. So.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, you are in a leadership position at a significant organization, and with that comes certain responsibilities, and carrying that burden all the time is kind of just one of the things that you get to do as an executive. We were talking earlier in our initial conversation about your, shall we say, non-traditional path to the C-suite, and I so enjoyed hearing your story because one of the passions that I have is finding people with perhaps not traditional, business school backgrounds. It's very standard here in the States to expect somebody to go, after high school, you got to do 4 years of undergrad, get the bachelor, and then you have to go and, do the internships, and you got to go get your MBA and all the things. And some people just don't follow that path, and they're still phenomenal leaders and executives. And so I loved hearing your story. Would you mind taking us back? How did sales become your path to the C-suite?
Growing up, I was not the best student in the world. I was terrible at it. My going all the way to fourth grade, I remember my parents came in to talk to teachers. It was parent-teacher conferences, and the teachers told my parents that I spent more time in the corner of the classroom than actually learning, that he actually put a plaque there for me. So,
Oh,
I think throughout recent history too, there's been a lot of some of the best people leading companies have been college dropouts, and they go on to pursue their passions and do great things. And I think there's a time and a place for everybody with higher learning. I just took a different path of cutting my teeth in the real business world of it, and it really was trial by fire. Again, terrible student. I bounced around, had a bunch of different majors in college. I took business for a little while, which is weird because that's what I do for a living now. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I think the one that I stuck with the most was being criminal justice, and I would have made a really crappy cop. So it was better that I jumped into this. Sales was really more of a better fit for me. So,
that's
but
amazing.
I was kind of a listless ship through all of that of figuring out like what I wanted to do with life. And there's no, clear path. And my ex-wife and I actually got pregnant with our first son. And I didn't want to be a deadbeat dad. I was like, I need to get something that's, substantial and make a life for my son. And so my dad, of all people, he encouraged me to go to college in the first place, just because he did drywall for 35 years and didn't want to see his son get in the trade, which I would have also been very terrible at. I'm not lazy. I just don't like manual. I like working in my yard.
Right.
But doing that
Uh,
for a living day in and day out, I give tradesmen the most utmost respect to do that every day, all day. It is not within me to do that.
it's not
Um,
easy. Yeah.
it's not, no. So yeah, we got pregnant, and my dad, he's like, "What are you gonna do with your life now that you're gonna be a father?" And I said, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, you gotta get a real job." And, he's like, my parents have always been very brutal with each other. And, he said, "You inherited your mother's gift of BS, so maybe you should sales." So,
Sales, I love it.
yeah. So I went and got my first sales job, and, I started working at, an auto auction, and I just, like, immediately, like, jumped into it of, it was great. What was great about it is, like, you know, I could use talking as a means to, you know, earning a living for myself and building relationships. And it was, we bounced around a lot when I was a kid. We didn't grow up with a lot. It was always dependent on my parents' money. So, or my dad's, amount of work he was doing. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So I was in 9 different schools, between the start of
Wow.
kindergarten to the time I graduated high school. So we bounced around a lot, in 2 different states. We lived in Ohio, we lived in California. And, you kind of learn to, like, pivot and make friends quickly. And, you listen, you kind of figure out scenarios, and, you're a little bit of a chameleon. So I would say since, like childhood, I was almost bred into being, good at sales for that matter. And, it was just a natural progression of things. And, this auto auction thing was great for a little while. And then they decided, which is a huge no-no. And I've learned on my side, is do not mess with anyone's commission. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and, they took that away from us, so it was kind of left like, well, they gave us like very, 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 very modest, salary bump. And it was like, well, that's not really enough for me to do anything with trying to build a life for my son. So I went and got another job, and it was something that I knew I wasn't fully, um, prepared for, but it was like, I'm gonna give it my all because, again, for my son. And, I started off in the metals industry, and I got started with a computer and a phone, and they were like, "Best of luck to you." And in a matter of a few years, I turned that into $2.5 million in revenue. And
Wow.
again, seem to have a knack for that. However, in the world of, like, sales training, it is sometimes lost. I'm sure you're aware of this, Jenica, with men. You don't reach some level of maturity until you hit a certain age. I'll
Yep.
be I'll be 43 in a few weeks, and I don't know if you know this or not, but men reach full, emotional maturity at the age of 43. So
I believe
I
it.
I've got work to do in the next 2 weeks, I'll say that much.
No
So
pressure.
yeah, no pressure. I might delay it for another year. But the sales training I received there was kind of lost on me a little bit. Like, I couldn't fully grasp it in my mid-20s of what was really being bestowed upon me. It took me a little while to figure that out afterwards. It really was trial by fire. It was brutal. It was excruciating. My boss at the time, I actually had 3 bosses. It was 3 owners, and, one was amazing. He was a great mentor, and everything else, but unfortunately got overshadowed by the 2, other ones who were, very, 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 very seasoned, salespeople, and had little patience for not selling, little patience for trying to bring people up. And, in their own way, it was, looking back now that I'm on the other side of it, of 13 years from when I got let go, of I should have, embraced a little bit more then. Like, I wasn't really fully grasping it. And that's, one of the reasons why I ended up getting let go, even though I was beating sales targets. It was just, I think they felt like I had reached my peak and I wasn't, getting to the next level.
Interesting.
Um, so I kind of had to, like, reinvent myself a little bit. And, my wife, um, who we were just dating at the time, we had moved in together, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to do sales anymore. Like, it was brutal. I wasn't sleeping very well. I worked 8 to 6, 5 days a week. and it was also a requirement to come in from noon to or noon, or sorry, 8 to noon on Saturdays. Um,
Wow.
and, it was, like I said, very, very cutthroat industry. And so again, I don't know if I wanted to do that again. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go back to school, maybe I'll whatever. And, my wife, God bless her to this day. At the time, I was like, well, that's not very supportive. I was like, well, I'm gonna go back to school. Can you like carry us for a little while? She's like, I don't want to do that. So um again, I was making a lot of money for 30 years old. So, we had a certain lifestyle that we had attained that, all of that was going to go away. So anyway, I came to Naturepedic because I really wanted to test myself because I had a lot of doubt in my mind of like, could I get to that level again? Could I have that level of success? I wanted to test myself, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but just more like going back to basics, if you will. And
Sure.
that's what I did here. And I started at the very bottom rung for sales. And, very quickly, I used some of those principles that were so, it came at me so blisteringly fast at my old job that here I could actually like hone in on it and then utilize it. And because selling mattresses versus selling steel, which is a very fast moving commodity, totally different experience. And I just worked my way up. I figured out the whole business, and every year that goes by, I had more and more responsibility. And in 2021, um, I jokingly refer to it as me doing a hostile takeover of marketing. Um,
Huh.
I told the owners that, I had a great rapport with the marketing team. We um, had our VP of marketing and sales left at the time to go into private equity. And, it kind of left this void. And we had a couple people come in. They just weren't really jiving well with the rest of the team. And I was like, let me try my hand at it. I've done really well for sales, and I give them credit. They're very trustworthy people. And, they were like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And here we are 5 years later. And, when I took over, we had 6 stores. We're going to have 31 by the end of this year.
That's
Um,
fast.
we actually had our largest growth month ever last month, which is phenomenal. Like almost mid double digits.
Whoa.
And it was very, very, and even April was a very, very strong month too. And everything just continues to build, and adding in new product categories and hiring new people. It's crazy for me to think when I first when I was director of sales 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that I had one direct report, and now I have over 70 people that are underneath me and guiding this
Wow.
company. So it's really been like I thought before was like a trial by fire, and now it's like the weight of the company is on me, and I have to kind of learn as we go. And I know getting into the marketing side of things is very exciting because sales, I don't wanna say sales is the same. Sales has definitely evolved from what it was. It's not all your, Glengarry, Glenn Ross, type,
Right.
boiler room selling like it was in the '80s.
But that
It's
doesn't stop people
nuanced.
from trying to keep those habits up sometimes.
My god, it is it's brutal when I watch, like, because I get, like, salespeople that try and get me to buy their, software, stuff else,
Yep.
especially in my position. And I have to like almost school them slightly of like, you can't approach people that way. Like, you have a
Right.
good service. Here's a
Yes.
couple bits of advice for you.
Yep.
Maybe come back again in 6 months and try again with this level of approach and
Right.
see how it works. Cause coming in guns blazing isn't good for anybody.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm curious. I mean, this is a fascinating career arc, and because it doesn't follow a lot of the path steps that other people might take as they're on their way up. One of the questions I really want to ask you is, what do you think that sales gave you access to on that path that another career path might not have?
I have a very good answer for that, and it's really like I am my father's son, and what I mean by that is my dad was a I still am in my core. My dad was like I'm like a 76-year-old man trapped in a 42-year-old's body. I'm very cantankerous and grumpy. And what sales does for me with that is it pulls me out of that, and being able to, communicate, to network, and to be able to utilize, I know those skills are in there, but my natural, proclivity is to just like, I love quiet. Right. So, and, my dad, I think like five people, he passed away. I still don't know if I'm one of them. So, well, I guess we'll never know.
That's funny.
Um, but, that gave me a lot of access. When I came into Naturepedic, I had only been to one customer's business the entire time I was there. One customer. I'd seen everything was over the phone. So being at Naturepedic, it was like my very first day, they flew me to Las Vegas for a trade show. I hadn't even been in office yet. They flew me to a trade show. I get put into the ABC Baby and Kids Show, which is the Las Vegas Convention Center at the time.
Okay.
It's like 1.2 million square feet of trade show booths. And it was so eye-opening to me. I got about an hour and a half of training, and they're like, all right, go talk to people. And I was like, I've never had to do that for work before. So and then the next 3 days was all these customers coming in, and it really helped me hone in on the product itself, because it was just the best way to get into it. It was just both feet, hands dirty, ready to go. And I think when a lot of organizations, like, they're like, oh, here's your manual, we'll come back to you in a few weeks after you've read the manual, and then we'll get started. Like, if you're the head of an organization, figure out the best possible way to make those new employees jump into both feet. It'll be uncomfortable. It's a good make or break for a lot of new people, of whether or not they can handle it, because it really does trust, trust them. Test their mettle, if you will, of how they're going
Sure.
to be out in the field, especially with sales. Like, if you can't, this is the safest space you're going to be. And if I'm going to throw you out there, and if you can't, handle thinking on your feet at a certain level, again, people are going to stutter step a little bit here or there. But if you can't think on a certain level, then how are you going to be out on the road when I'm not there? So that was like the
Right.
best possible thing that they could have done for me here. I don't think they did it on purpose. I really don't. It was just like our company back then. It's very family owned, family run, and you know, everything was very, very new and fresh. So they really didn't there was no like career development per se. Like, this company got started by luck a lot of ways. And I think it's the people who work here that love it and care for what we do that really kind of propels it forward.
I love that. There are a number of things that you touched on when you were talking about this, and I need to point out for our audience just a friendly reminder that only 3% of the workforce is willing to do sales. And that's the 3% that are willing. That doesn't mean they're good at it. It's it's a hard thing to do. And I obviously the core of our business is sales, and I've spoken with many founders and CEOs who they are secretly hoping for, the long-awaited death of a salesman to come about because it's been promised so many times and it hasn't yet been delivered. They still have humans on their payroll, and they're volatile, they're variable, they're hard to predict, they're hard to manage. Salespeople are notoriously hard to manage, and they're expensive. And so I think a lot of leaders are hoping that, now that AI is here, we can replace the sales team, or now that the internet is here, we can replace the sales team. I've seen every iteration of this. Every time something, hot new technology comes up, we're hoping to be able to get rid of sales, because there's kind of a black box element to it, where in other areas like operations, if you decide to dial up, you dial up. If you dial down production, you dial down production. But sales is a bit of a mystery, because if you go tell your revenue team, all right, we just dial up what you're doing and get 20% more next year, there are other factors at play. And you made a really interesting comment a minute ago about how, and I'm not going to quote you perfectly, so bear with me here. But what I heard was, you don't necessarily have the luxury of doing it your way all the time, because the marketplace doesn't respond the way you might always want. You can't go out and be super brash because the marketplace may not respond. You can't necessarily go out and introvert hard because the marketplace may not respond the way you want. And I think one of the things that I'm picking up as you're talking about this fascinating path that you took to the C-suite is that Sales can, when done well, when executed well with skill, one of the things that a human learns is how to respond to the give and take of the marketplace. Like, we do not have the luxury of, just endless self expression. We really can only move forward and get that dialing up to happen with the cooperation of another entity, the customer. And we can't force it. We can't break their kneecaps and say, "Give me your money so I can get more sales." That's not what we do in the marketplace. And so the only way we're going to get the growth we seek is by some kind of cooperation. And what you are describing is, it sounds like it would be tremendously helpful in the C-suite as well when you're leading an organization full of people in all kinds of different departments. And I love your observation that you have to work with the marketplace, and you can't just show up and think it'll do exactly what you want. And I think that's a lesson that salespeople learn very early on. You can't just show up and think, "I'm going to dial it up. You'll give me more money. Everything's good." It's-
Well, I think those are 2 points out of your statement is, one, I don't think there's always, I think, gonna be a need for salespeople in the sense of, one, relationship building, especially if you have a, consistent, because an AI bot is not gonna go to that customer's facility to solve that problem, or to take
right,
that guy to dinner or that lady to dinner and build that relationship.
right.
That is something that is very nuanced, and, that's half of sales. They have to like you. So, you could have an amazing product, but, like, doing that is important. And I think for new salespeople, there's 3 things. I think poker players are probably, like, secretly the best salespeople there ever were, because they're great at reading the room and they're great at reading what's about to happen, and that's, like, I don't think it's something you're necessarily, you know, trained to do. I think you're either born with it or you're not.
I
Um,
completely agree, and I'm double clicking on this because it's so important. W I have seen thousands of salespeople come through our doors at Slattery Sales Group. We've worked in over 2,000 different companies, and some of the most skilled, elite sales professionals have also incidentally been very good poker players.
it is. You have to know to read the room, and I think for salespeople, there's only 3 ways to get across to a consumer these days. It is, again, it's not guns blazing. People are so over that. It's not the way the world works anymore.
Right.
And the 3 things to get across to any, person that you wanna sell your product to is, "How are you gonna save me money?" is a good one. That's a good one to start with. Also, another one is, empathy, and what I mean by that is empathetic to what their issues are. How is your product going to solve an issue that they are currently having? Or 2, it's plain and simple. If your product is the same as Bob's and the same as Steve's and you guys have all the same costs, how are you building on that relationship? And that's cornerstone for all of those things, but that one thing could be the make or break if you're going to get that sale or not, is how much you're selling yourself. If you remember that, John at so and so company, he's got, a kid, and his kid plays soccer and his kid's got a big tournament coming up. You follow up with him a couple days after, you marked on your CRM file that John's kid's got a soccer game, and you call that guy up and be like, "Hey, how was, Billy's soccer game?" And but, "Oh, it's great. We love seeing him." And charges that relationship more. So if you're doing those types of things that, like, again, Bob and Steve aren't doing, that's what's going to ultimately get you that sale. If there's not a problem to be solved, and if your cost is the same as everybody else's.
The
So those are things
human
to identify.
I love that. The human connection is so important, and it will never go away. It's it's there. It's as long as you are selling to humans, you will need a human somewhere in that sale, otherwise marketing can handle it, and, you're selling on Amazon. If you have a human in that transaction, you need a human, and only a human can do. And you had mentioned in our earlier conversation how it would be really useful for a lot of leaders to get into the trenches to see what are their teams seeing on the front lines, what are they experiencing on the front lines. And you brought up the show Undercover Boss, and you said more executives need to get in the trenches. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I came up from, we'll call it the trenches. I think it was still pretty nice, but I came up from the trenches. And I think that's where, some, if not a lot of, CEOs and executives get lost in is like, okay, man, I made it. I'm in the quote unquote ivory tower now. I'm C-suite. I did it. I made the level of career. Now it's easy coasting. I can kick my feet up. And I think if you're going to have a very well run organization, I think Costco is probably one of great examples of how to run a company.
Yes.
Pay their employees very well. They listen to them. There's a lot of perks to working there, and you have to build out that network. And that's what, like, if I have a retail, we have a retail, I'm just saying in general, if I had a retail organization where I didn't pay people well and give them the encouragement to, keep doing well, if there's an issue, do you think they're going to care? Probably not.
Right.
But if you know that they have some sort of skin in the game, if they have some sort of tie to everything, or they're paid well, then they're going to go the extra mile for you. And especially if you're down in the trenches with them, like they really, I think everybody wants a leader to look up to and somebody to, be able to, you know, hear what they have to say. And it's not just like I talk to everyone around here, like, from the janitor to, ownership the exact same way. Ask them how things are going, ask them, any old question about like how the company's ran or whatever. And there's so many good tidbits that I've picked up along the way from their point of view that helps me be better at my job. And I think not doing so is incredibly ignorant.
Love that. What do you think are the top few things that leaders miss when they are leading only through dashboards?
I think operationally for sure, is usually a big one. I mean, these guys are, on the ground floor, building the product, moving the product, shipping the product, and to not, listen to them of like, especially efficiencies for that matter. But two, from a marketing perspective, it's like, I don't think you should really be doing that because of XYZ. And it's like, oh, that's a really good viewpoint. And, it's something that I didn't really think about. You always have this perception. I think sometimes, and I'm very guilty of it myself, it gets muddled a little bit of personal preference versus what's actually right for the company itself. And
Oh,
I'm not speaking to myself. I'm speaking to the audience. I mean, I would say 80% of our audience is female. And I would say for our adult beds is probably the age of 44. I'm a man, I'm only 42. And if I didn't work here, I might not buy our product in particular because, I have bought into the ideals of why we are here. So I should be speaking to that consumer where they're going to make, the choice in that matter. And I think sometimes like, oh, I don't really like that ad. But then I just have to do a double check on myself of, I'm probably just don't like it because it's not something that resonates with me. I have to really think what resonates with my customer. And that's where like, people who are underneath me or people who are in other departments, they have that perception too that, maybe something isn't what you think it should be and taking all those things in.
and what you're tapping into there, just so our listeners understand, is the hidden strengths in an organization. Because one of the things that we do at Slattery is we help our customers really answer the question that's sounds really simple, but is not that easy to answer, which is what do you actually sell? And there might be other competitors in your space who also seem to offer the same product or service, or there's a ton of overlap between you and them. And to try to get to clarity on what are you actually selling, because that will inform your marketing language, that informs your sales conversations, that informs what you invest in the future to protect the moat around your fortress competitively. And what you're talking about is really insightful in that I think if you were to just, let's say, take over the company, like let's say you were coming from the outside, you buy the company that you're in today, but you're coming at it with your perspective. You haven't been in drinking that water and you haven't been hearing those conversations. There might be things that you assume you can get rid of or cut, or you might decide, let's market in this direction instead, that can actually miss perhaps some of those core little magic elements in your brand that are core to its long-term survival. And I'm curious, have you ever seen that happen where there are little competitive strengths or just little pieces of magic in not necessarily what the company does, but how the company does it that can be perhaps easy to slip through the fingers, especially if there's any kind of transition in ownership? I would love to hear your thoughts on
Well, luckily, our owners, same owners for 23 years now, but
This is true.
I think
Hypothetical.
hypothetical, but new people coming in to like elevated positions that have been here. It is honestly a good example. Not anybody with ownership, but it's. I'm very anti marketing agency for anything that we do. Is we've worked with a multitude of marketing agencies over the years, and the one thing that we've learned through and through, and this is any good advice for any marketing agency, everyone always wants to come in and give us some cookie cutter idea of how we should be marketing our brand. It's like, well, you should be doing this, this, and this. I'm like, yeah, I get that. What are you going to do differently or say differently that I don't already know, and fit us into somewhere? And I think learning more about what we do and spending more time about what makes us tick, um, then the more apt to have much greater success. So I choose to. We've done a really good job of vetting all these people out. Is from SEO to paid social to digital marketing in general, we have found people that are experts in their fields, and we've almost built like our own marketing agency. And I think that's why we're doing so well as a company, is taking that time to do all of that. Because the problem is too, is it's overpriced. You're paying like, 10, 15, $20,000 a month easy for a marketing agency to come in. You're paying all those people's salaries, when if you just paid that one
Right.
person, you'd probably save yourself, a couple hundred grand a year just by going with that person who's actually an expert at what they do. And it's been, amazing for us. And they take the time to learn. And
Right. And I got to double
we're
click on what you said a minute ago, where the marketing agency comes in. And this is true with a lot of consultants. We have seen this in management consulting. We have seen this in operations. We've seen this in revenue. They come in with a cookie cutter idea of this is how it ought to be. But every company is like, I mean, it's like a thumbprint. It's a unique organization full of unique individuals. Every single one is going to be different. Yes, there are certain truths that are going to be consistent across time and space, but a lot of how you go to market must be finely tuned into your market, your audience, and your product or service and what it is that you do. I love that. Thank you. I just wanted to double click on that because it's exactly what you're saying. I have seen show up in other organizations, and I'm curious. I have to ask because I'm very excited about this. When you and I were talking earlier, you had talked about working with investors, and along the same line, on the investor side, how everyone can come in with a spreadsheet and an idea for making the company more profitable. So I'm curious, what has made your experience constructive with that? I mean, you've seen that go down. Can you talk to that a little bit too, kind of as part of the same topic?
Yeah, we did a very good job of vetting out who we were going to bring in to from an investor standpoint, because we wanted to be harmonious. We didn't want to water down what we were doing. We didn't want somebody to come in just, cutting, burning, slashing. Is an organization, because it's that people run in fear, right? They hear, you know, private equity, they hear investors, and then people just think like, oh, there goes my job, or whatever. And we did not want to go down that path with anybody. So the company that we're working with, they've been very hands off, which has been phenomenal. I mean, if anything, they're doing more investing into the company than cutting and burning, and it's actually made us have a different mindset too, to where we've been a little bit more fiscally responsible, which is great. Um, from top down, everyone just thinks a little bit more differently now, and we're allocating money towards different things. So it's not like we're lining anyone's pockets. It's they're helping grow the company. And I think I guess if anyone has a company that's looking at, private equity or investors or whatever, really think about who you're getting into bed with. No pun intended.
Right.
And,
Yeah. No, this is good. Yeah.
because at the end of the day, they've got a say in your baby. And, you want to make sure that you're all aligned on what you're going to be doing before it even happens. And, I think that's been invaluable for us. And, we're 7, 8 months in now with this investment deal, and it's been a great partnership, and they're very happy with the results too. I mean, I guess it would be a different story if we were like trending in a very different direction, but
True.
things are going so well. They're just, we're going to leave you guys to it. We're not going to touch anything. Here's a few suggestions, but merely just suggestions. It's been really great, and they have, Also looking for investors who like find your biggest weakness as an organization is huge. What are we not good at? And then finding investors who are like the best at that, on top of obviously being able to work well together, but where are you going to fill that gap in? And the one, like our biggest pain point has always been manufacturing. Like, how do we scale our business to being this, multi, 9-figure business and, getting to that point. And that's what their expertise is in the manufacturing side. So they've been invaluable coming in of like streamlining how we get stuff out the door. We're shipping faster than we've ever done in our company history now because they've come in and like, oh, you should move this piece of equipment over here. You should hire this person. We should rearrange this. And it's just been we're like, oh my God, that makes total sense. And we didn't really think about stuff like that. So that was been, it was a good learning experience in the best possible way. So
That's awesome. And
yeah.
and you're right, it is different from the, perhaps more fear-driven narrative that we often hear, which is, they're gonna come in, they're gonna cut, and they're gonna cut too deep, and, of course, we've all seen that go down too, and it's funny, you were talking about the undercover boss style view from the trenches, where you go and you see what are things like on the front lines, and I know a lot of really good revenue leaders who do that on the revenue side, where they will just go and talk to the customer too. And they want to hear from the customers. And sometimes that means a lot of frontline meetings and talking to the sales guys. What are you hearing from the marketplace? And that kind of feedback loop really brings a lot of intelligence to their strategic decisions that are being made, perhaps at 30,000 feet. And I'm thinking of one instance in particular, and I can't take credit for this because I read it recently from one of my connections on LinkedIn. And for the life of me, I can't remember this. So if you're listening, please ping me in the comments because I'm so sorry I forgot your name. But one of my connections on LinkedIn recently shared private equity story where they came in and they had EBITDA targets to hit, and they came in and it was a product producing operation. They came in and they cut, I think it was at least 20 to 25% of headcount on the floor. And they hit their Q3 target in Q2. It's not surprising. Numbers work really well when you just slash. But what they didn't realize was that the 20% of people they cut was the 20% who knew how to repair the machines when there was an issue. And by Q4, they had trouble getting their product to market at all because the machines had gotten stuck. People didn't know how to fix them. And that there was a lot of institutional knowledge that left with those people, and that boots on the ground knowledge of who knows what are the things that aren't written down, what do we do really well that's working that maybe isn't showing up on a spreadsheet. And that's why I love your take on this so much, because it's the kind of stuff that you don't learn in an MBA. Perhaps like go out and walk the line, and it may not be the most exciting work. It's not nearly maybe as exciting as whatever the spreadsheet is showing, but it's really valuable intel. And there's a time and place for it in the context of your other work too. But I'm curious, what would you tell like a, let's say, active investor, PE or VC partner, what would you tell someone who wants to invest actively in a company's growth, but may not necessarily understand the human infrastructure behind it because they haven't had, maybe they're young, they maybe haven't had that boots on the ground experience?
I think, it's that same, undercover boss deal is, you can hear from the prior ownership or you can hear from, people in my position, like, oh, everything's great, right? Especially
Right.
people who aren't on the ground floor on things, but like really getting into learning, like, what does Joe do on the floor as the plant manager? Like, what's he seeing? And, what guys are the most vital to you? Where can we not cut coming in here that you feel like is the most invaluable? And, taking all of that into consideration and taking that department by department by department, really hones in on, okay, it might look good for this quarter, but like we're really going to feel it come holiday. And because we, slashed and burned coming in and we got rid of great people who had really great institutional knowledge. And, now we're left kind of, trying to figure everything out. And I think that that would be huge of anybody coming in looking into investing in a company is go on the floor. talk to the people, figure out what they, want or whatever. And honestly, it's all that's, very new to me, but it seems so simplistic in the way of, you know, I think there is people come in and they invest in companies and it makes people start running scared, especially when like, oh, there's this round of layoffs and then that round of layoffs, and then this round of layoffs. I think one, if you're going to do layoffs, just do it in one fell swoop if you
Yep.
possibly can. This way,
Yeah.
and then just announce it's done. We made the cuts we needed to. We had to streamline a little bit, trim the fat. It's done. Everyone's fine. Because you do it once. All right, everyone's, okay, whew, I made it. You do it a
Right.
second time, they're like, oh crap, like, am I next? And,
Yes. Trust is gone.
and they're not focusing on their work. They're not focusing on what needs to be done.
Right.
And, you're going to lose productivity. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. And then they stop performing and they're like, you got to get out of here now. And it's like, well, if you would have just left that person alone, they probably would have been highly successful. I think that would be, huge for me. Again, one fell swoop, but also taking into consideration all those factors of, listen, you're looking to invest in this company, whether it's VC or private equity, and it got it to its point for one reason or another. And it wasn't
Right.
magic, and it wasn't does something done overnight. It was from all the people. I mean, your human capital to me is the most important, field that you've got in your entire organization. And I think looking at that as a whole, it's great. Morale is a big thing. I mean, I have I do this for my own sake, but I do it for other employees. I got a no a-hole policy at Naturepedic. And if I can't get a beer with you, you probably not going to work here.
Right.
And, it's just, it makes, we're all at work 8, 9, 10 hours a day sometimes. A lot of us travel together and everything. And, I think if you're insufferable in a lot of ways. Like, it really just it's bad for morale. And I think why I brought that up is the morale point is, if you come in, you fire somebody's best friend at work without really thinking twice about it, and again, not taking friendships into consideration. It's really more of like, as holistically,
Sure.
morale's broken, right? People leave and
Yeah.
everything else, and like, you're gonna see some level of productivity fall. So I think keeping that engine going of like, listen, nobody's getting let go right now. We're going to spend the next year and a half just assessing everything. It'll get people to work even harder. Maybe you don't even have to fire anybody. So giving people that opportunity to save themselves in a way without just looking at a spreadsheet, it would be my best advice to anybody coming in to invest in a company.
I love that. Well, I think you can drop the microphone because that is an excellent note on which to end. I want to make sure I honor your time, and you have been so generous in sharing it with us today. Arin, thank you. This is exactly the kind of conversation that this podcast exists to have, because it generating revenue can look simple from the outside, but there is a lot happening under the hood that isn't quite as easy to do or manage or lead through. So, thank you so much for walking us through some of that creativity and leadership and outside the box thinking that has been so much fun to dive into. So, thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on again.
Awesome. Thank you. The To our listeners, we deeply appreciate your time. I know there are a lot of other things that you could be listening to here. We appreciate you joining us on Revenue Unscripted. Please share this with a friend. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.